Okay, well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to our webinar on preparing your organization for a technology project. My name's Alan Reed. I'm a director of Get Savvy. We provide online self-paced project management training, as well as advice for ordinary business people faced with a technology project. This webinar is part of our education program to eliminate bad projects from the non-profit sector. I'm delighted to welcome two people with me today who are veterans of lots of projects. I dare say at least some of them have had their challenging moments. Can I start with you, Jackie? Do you mind introducing yourself a little bit?
Hi, good morning, everybody. So my name's Jacqueline Easton. I came across Alan, probably about 7 or 8 years ago, I think it is now. So my background is I was a COO for a number of years for a large organisation, been through various digitalisation projects, old legacy systems, huge amounts of data, and I've certainly learned what works and what doesn't work. I'm now CEO for a not-for-profit for a very small organisation, and I'm just about to embark on exactly the same thing all over again this year. So there you go.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And then Tim, the same to you, if you don't mind.
Yeah, thanks, Alan, and good morning, everyone. So my name's Tim Fleming. I'm the head of operations currently at the Institute of Health Visiting, which is a charitable organisation. Previously, I worked for a leisure trust and have been involved in a few technical projects there. And I'm now working with Alan this year on a fairly large website and CRM rebuild for the IHV.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, both. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask Jackie and Tim to give me their comments as we go through the different elements of the webinar. So it's not just me by any means. Okay, starting off with a little bit of webinar etiquette. So first of all, the session is going to be made available to all delegates. We'll send you the recording and the content, so don't worry so much about scribbling mad notes. Just listen to what's going on. You can relax. Please use the chat box or the Q&A box, whenever you feel within Zoom, to post questions about your own project. If you are having technical problems, post that as well. My colleague Glenda is on hand to help with any of that. But very much, we're having a Q&A session at the end. And if you've got things that are bugging you or you're worried about on your own project, please post it and we'll try to get it into the Q&A at the end. But everyone who's come to the webinar, we're providing some really, I think, fantastically helpful resources. So we're providing some project templates and job aids that we hope will help you look fantastic on your own projects. And then, of course, we do really ask you, we'll send you an email after this, and we beg you, please, to give us your feedback. It's the only thing we ask for on, does this content work for you? Is it relevant? Is there anything you would have asked us to do differently? Okay, well, without further ado, let's press on. So the agenda is really covering the stages of preparing for your own real life project. So we start off with conceptualization, creating your business case, what really matters about getting that approved and getting that right. Then, of course, we move from there into presuming that your organization has said, yes, we'll spend that money on that thing. It's how do you then work out the detail of what you're going to do and what you really need to achieve as part of the project, and how you're going to tell suppliers what you need and agree it amongst yourselves. Then the process of vendor selections, and how you make sure that you pick a partner that's actually going to work fantastically well for you and is not going to have a whole series of arguments and difficulties later. And then the key area of preparing your own organization for the implementation. That means getting your team, your management team, your colleagues, everyone prepared for the fact that there's going to be a lot of work involved in this project, and how to get the best out of people for that. Finally, we're going to have a Q&A session at the end, as I've mentioned. Just a quick point on these agenda points. We get asked from time to time to come and salvage a project, or we get asked to work out what went wrong with a project. And I promise you that in a solid kind of 60% of the projects where they have gone wrong and people, are shouting at each other and very stressed and etc. A solid 60% of them, the problems trace their roots back to these 4 areas here. Before you've even had a kickoff meeting with your new supplier, it's not getting these areas right that is the cause of all of those problems. If you get these areas right, then you're already in the kind of 40% where you're much more likely to have a great and successful project. So we can't overemphasize the importance of these areas. Finally, we're also, as part of the webinar follow-up, we'll be giving all attendees 50% off our training course called Managing Technology Change Projects for business people. That's an online self-paced training course. A recent delegate described it as a lifesaver, and it's accredited by some prestigious organizations, the Institute of Leadership, the International Association for Project Managers, and CPD UK. So if you're in a position to do it, you might consider begging your management team to allow you to take the course, or if you're on the management team, consider it for your colleagues as part of de-risking your project. Okay, so just a tiny bit about where projects go wrong. A lot of people think that the problems are going to be caused, they imagine it's always about the technology provider. But actually, we've done a lot of research on this. We ask, where projects have struggled, where do you trace the roots back to the problems? If we look down here, for instance, bottom left, a lot of people struggle with their projects where they say their staff weren't brought into the project. The staff engaged reluctantly. They were all very busy. They didn't really understand what was going on. They didn't understand what was in it for them. And if your staff aren't engaging with your final live system, even if the project's gone on time and on budget, you haven't got any benefits from the project. Then up here on the top right, a lot of people said that they desperately wished that they'd looked at their processes more before they started. So essentially, they ended up recreating inefficient ways of working as part of their new project. Again, another kind of failure. And then here on the top right, they essentially said we weren't really clear about what we wanted out of the project. Only a small number at the bottom right had a problem with actually the technology itself. So the short takeaway from there is it's the great majority of your problems are people problems, and you can mitigate those risks by investing properly in your people and putting time into that. Okay, so the first part of a project for most organizations is really the business case, where you're talking about, should we do this? Is it a necessary thing for us to do? How much is it going to cost, etc.? So starting off right there. And our advice on the business case is very much to treat it as something about getting benefits, not just sorting out negativities about your current system. So what do we mean by that? So first of all, understanding what your business case is. Whether it's a really formal document or a really formal process or something that's less formal for a smaller project, perhaps, it's recognizing that it's the foundation. It's what you're telling your organization you're going to do, why you're going to do it, how it's going to be measured as successful, and how you're going to prevent it being unsuccessful. And at its core, it's a bid for cash. Just always think of your business case as a bid for spending money and resources on things that could be spent elsewhere, but you're saying, I'm going to do it as part of achieving these benefits. And the reason that's really important is because you need to make sure you're delivering all those benefits if you do actually get your business case approved. And your job when you're creating a business case is to make sure that your decision makers are fully informed. It's a decision support document, essentially. So as part of that, we always say, never forget the people side of it. So a lot of people focus on just creating a document with this section, that section, and then just hand it over to the committee or finance committee or management team and go, ta-da, here it is. And then it gets knocked back. It gets rejected. What we find is to be just as important as the content of the business case is the process that you must go through of socializing it. And that means as you're developing it, show it to people, ask them what their problems are, ask them if this would solve their problems, ask them if you've forgotten anything, ask them about how relevant this is to them. Do they agree it and approve it before you put it in for approval? A big benefit of working that way is not only do you get your business case approved, but you're making sure that, for instance, your management team are definitely on the same page before you start. It would be hard to overstate how many projects start and then somebody on the management team says, well, I'm not sure that's what we want to do actually. And you've got problems right away. So in terms of specific advice about it, we find one of the most important things about any bid for cash, any bid for going ahead on this kind of project is essentially to start with your big picture, start with your organizational goals. And this can be quite a concrete thing. You know, you get a list of your organizational goals, your 5-step strategy, whatever it might be for your organization. And then on each one of them say, this is how this project is going to enable this goal, or this is how this goal is not possible unless we do make some changes over here. We find that brings it to life for your management team and for your fund holders. And it's also important not to forget the negative side of it. If you're not able to achieve your business goals, in other words, they've said, here's what you must achieve, but we're not going to give you the tools to do it, bring that to life as well, make that really clear. That kind of thing has an impact. Too many business case documents focus purely on the technology, purely on very dry things that are not particularly alive to your fund holders, and then people don't understand and they'll reject it. So an easy way to find your benefits that you're going to explain to people this project is going to solve for you is to focus on your problems. You know, most organizations have got lots of problems, and a lot of people are very good at telling you what their problems are, but they're not very good at telling you how to solve them. So in your business case, a really handy technique is to find your problems, like our members can't find anything on our website, or people email us when they should be able to self-serve, or we're wasting a ton of time, or we don't have any data. Turn those problems into benefits for your project. Say, this is what we're going to be doing. We're going to be streamlining this. We're going to be saving that amount of time. We're going to be providing much better service. The more specific you are on those, the more difficult it becomes to actually reject and not recognize your business case. So the goal is really simple. Show that the money you're asking for and the benefits you're hoping to achieve from there give you that return on investment. So your benefits outweigh the costs in simple terms. Never forget that one. Okay, so there's a quick summary of what the business case contains. And don't worry about making all of the notes. We're going to send you all of this material. And actually, we're going to provide you with a very nice template, which is from the course I mentioned, by the way. The course has about 30 beautiful project templates in it. We'll send you that after the webinar. But at this point, I just wanted to ask for a bit of real-world experience from Tim and Jackie, if I may. Jackie, if you don't mind, if I could start with you. Do you mind telling me, have you had difficulties getting a business case approved or getting people to understand why you're asking for the money on a business case?
Yeah, I think definitely. And I think coming back to what the very essence of these projects are, they're change, and people react very differently to change. And as much as I think it is really key to get people to tell you their problems, suddenly those problems are not as big or as inconvenient when you start to talk about changing those. So I think it is, for me, what I've learned is the noisiest people, the most vocal ones, they're the ones that you want to get on board and invest in. I think that's a really, really good starting point. And also, I think it is taking those problems and actually turning them on their heads and showing all the benefits that they can, and keep coming back to what those benefits are, and on all the different levels, whether it's your stakeholders, for your staff, for your business, for your sales, whatever. Wrap all of those up and keep coming back to those, because over a period of time, people will actually start to see, okay, I get this. I sort of understand it. It makes it more tangible. So I'd definitely say get the noisy people on board and keep going there about how these things are actually going to benefit everybody in their own I suppose whether they're doing the role or they're in charge of the sales, make it look beneficial for them. Tell them what those benefits are and keep reinforcing that.
That's great advice. And Tim, I know from your position that you have you've got a working system essentially. You know, it's not like the building's on fire and you have no choice. So one of the biggest challenges can be that trustees or committee members can say, well, can't you make it all last another year so I don't have to make a decision? You know, you're asking for all this money, just make the old rubbish last another year and then I can just get away with not making any decisions. How did you overcome that, you know, getting people to understand, yes, it is necessary and beneficial to spend what is always a large sum of money to any organization, whatever the sum is?
Yeah, I think a lot of points Jackie made there resonated with me as well. And I think it's about sharing the business case and the reason that you need the new technology as many times as possible. Again, as Jackie said, sort of selling the benefits. So why we need it. And yeah, we've had comments from board or budget approvers saying, right, how do we know we're not overspecking and buying more than we need? And I think the reassurance is the business process through the business case. So we look at your processes and make sure that it's matching those and you're getting what you need rather than just looking at the technology.
Fantastic. That's really great advice. And thanks everybody. We're getting some really good questions coming in through the Q&A and the chat. We don't care which, so we'll get to those as well where we can in the Q&A at the end. Okay, so we have to do this really rapidly. We could talk about the entire webinar on the business case. And by the way, we have modules in that on the business case and requirements gathering, etc., within the course I've been mentioning. So let's move swiftly on to a challenging area for most organizations: requirements gathering, assessing your needs, how you go about this process. And for most, so in this scenario where we are now, is great. Your business case has been approved. You've been so focused on lobbying your committee or your finance group or your council to let you have this money and give you the mandate to do this project. Now you're in this terrifying moment where they've said, okay, well, all right, well, we believe you. Here is the money. Don't forget you've promised all of these benefits. So it's on you to deliver those benefits. So where you have to start with that, we found, is that it's to start by being very clear and detailed about what you want from the project. You've kept things at a very high level for your finance committee. That's fine. But now we need to get into the nuts and bolts. So the big picture of it, though, is it's about evaluating the state of your organization in terms of their business processes, in terms of where the difficulties are, what's stopping you being the best you can be as an organization, and identifying your gaps and areas for improvement. But it's doing it in a granular way because you're going to be asking people to help you solve these problems. You need to be very clear about it. So how do you do that? First of all, it's recognizing that you've got two audiences. When it comes to requirements gathering or needs assessment, your two audiences that you have to be focused on is, first of all, your internal staff, your colleagues, your management team. You're asking them what you want, but you have to get them to agree what they want as well. So many projects, people are kind of a bit woolly about it internally. And then you try and reflect that to your second audience, who are your potential suppliers. And guess what happens when you're very woolly with what you want with your prospective suppliers. And then, of course, when your colleagues haven't quite signed it off, they haven't agreed or nailed it down between them. And then they start arguing between themselves in the middle of your project. And you know, the supplier is kind of stuck and has to charge you lots more money. So remembering those two audiences and remembering it's the opportunity to get agreement. You know, you've got to know yourself first. You've got to get agreement between yourselves first before you could then start giving it to the next audience, which is your potential suppliers. And then a big thing that we're always on about on these projects, because we see it so often, is don't focus on the technology. Don't go into a huddle with potential suppliers. It's always about the people side. Now, remembering looking ahead when you're doing your requirements gathering, that you're going to be asking for a lot of time from people over the next whatever months and a year or more to put all of this time into the project. So you've got to start off with that in the right way. You've got to start off by explaining why this is important to them, explaining their benefits before you sit down and start taking up their time, and then enthusing them about the project, making sure that they understand it's going to make their lives easier. Go to a granular level by team, and then you're using the requirements gathering as an opportunity to educate and enthuse people. So Jackie, do you mind if I pull you in a bit here? So you were the chief operating officer of a 200-person plus organization that had been using 20-year-old technology at the time. People were very attached to their ways of working. How did you get the best out of people when it came to somebody saying, "Oh, right, so what do you guys do for a living?" And tell us, give us on a granular level. What kind of problems did you have, and what kind of things did you find might help overcome those problems?
I think the biggest challenge that anybody's going to face is fear, and how that manifests, and that's very different and very personal in individuals. And there was definitely that en masse. As you said, Alan, we had legacy systems that hadn't supported the business, and through that process, people sort of created their own access databases. We had data all over the place, and people were quite happy. There was a big fear, I also think, with people where they associate technology is going to take away their jobs. They're going to have nothing left to do, which is not the case. So I think the most important thing in starting out on these projects is giving people that initial opportunity to say how they feel, even if it's just quick 3 minutes, and not trying to disagree with it, but making sure that it's valid, that we validate how they feel. And that's really, really important. And then I think it is, going back to what I said earlier, it's about looking and bringing in the opportunities with the right conversation and putting those fears to the side. People do open, and often it is the people at the grassroots who've got some really best ideas. They do those jobs inside and out. They talk to your customers. They know what works, what doesn't, and it's starting to tease those out. Like any type of project, the best thing we can all do is try and get that people believe that they came up with the best ideas, that the solutions that are going in place have come from them. And I think that really, really does work as well. But also keep the excitement and also explain about the opportunities. I've seen so many people completely change their roles and have gone on to be promoted, ended up in positions that they never dreamed about, and that's all come from technology projects as well. So there's a huge amount of opportunity also for personal development, but the people bit is the bit that's going to make or break your project, definitely. So you can't afford to ignore that bit.
Thank you. That's fantastic advice. And actually, I hadn't thought of that. Yes, we know people don't like change, but people can get very anxious when people come along and say, "So what do you guys do for a living? And what do you need?" It can feel like you're getting second guessed, and people can be reluctant to engage properly. And Tim, I think there's also a challenge of understanding who to have in the room, who are the right people to engage in your requirements gathering, and getting them on board with it. How are you approaching that?
Yeah, I think it's really important, as Jackie says, to try and get a broad spectrum of opinions, even if that is just a very short meeting to start off with. So going across your whole organization, finding out what issues they're coming across in terms of the technology that we've got in place, listening to sort of offered solutions. And then I think it's just consolidating that and being real, I think, with the time, because the greatest will in the world, if you've got a staff group of 30, 50 or 100, you can't have every single one of those people involved in the project. So as part of this phase, you really need to look at the key people that need to be involved. So who are using the systems, or who will be using the systems on a day-to-day basis, and maybe some of the key business area leads that you've identified through the business planning phase, and just making sure they're involved. So we've, with the project I'm on at the moment, just sort of whittled that down really to the key people.
Great, thank you. And I don't want to sound like Graham Norton, but I am going to take a question from the audience. We've had a really good, some really great questions coming in on the Q&A. I won't save them all for the end. So one attendee has asked, what are the most effective ways to get internal buy-in or change? and an effective way to deal with resistance. That's a key word. So you've got wreckers, moaners, resistors, and people who are just busy. Jackie, do you mind if I just pose that one to you? Because I know that was a big part of your last, that big transformation project.
I think the first thing I would say is that there are going to be some people who you are not going to be able to take with you. They're going to resist that change and they're going to fight it all the way to the end, possibly. So again, coming back, I had 200 odd people, so a real broad mix there. I think with a different hat on, I think from a psychology point of view, you have to give people that opportunity to express how they feel. I think that's really, really important. The other thing is that they're accountable. So they've really, we can do everything you can as the sponsor or as the project manager to bring people with you. But at the same time that we have to be, I guess, realistic that you're not going to get everybody's buy-in. But you need to make sure that you are support those people who are actively and committed to that project, because you can get this, I guess, this imbalance where people are influencing others and all those sorts of things. But I think give people the opportunity at the beginning to say what they want, work through anybody's issues with them, and the rest is down to them to a certain thing. And again, keep coming back. There's huge amounts of opportunity here for people, whether it's their own development or how they're going to do their job. It should be a positive thing, but there will be an element of negativity, and there's nothing none of us can do about that. You should read up on your change management. If you've been through courses, go back and revisit before you even start your projects.
I couldn't agree more. And the one final thing I'll add to that, because everything you said, completely agree. And we have a whole module on change management, and getting people on board and overcoming resistance, is to recognize that it's a vital part of your project, and it's going to consume a lot of time from your project management. So it's vital that you recognize that right from the beginning, that communicating outwards to your teams before you ask for their time, and all the way through the project, and explaining the benefits to them, and why the project is important, and where they fit into it, and how they can raise their queries and their concerns. It will save you a ton of time. It consumes a lot of time during your project, but if you don't do it, you'll really regret it, and it'll end up saving you a ton of time. Thanks so much for that, Jack. Okay, so then carrying on the same theme, we're still on requirements gathering. Some very concrete tips here. This is a really common one that we see all the time. People go and sketch out what their old system does. And essentially what they're doing there is explaining to a new supplier what they needed 5 years ago or 10 years ago. So it might seem really obvious, but it happens all the time. So actually, the majority of projects where I've done the requirements gathering and needs assessment, I've never looked at the old system deliberately, because what we're doing is we're looking at a business level. We're focusing on what it is you need to do now, what are your goals and ambitions now. And the way you used to do it years ago is kind of irrelevant, or the way that you're having to work around your old system is kind of irrelevant. Then before you start, this is going back to what Jackie and Tim have both said. People are busy, they don't like being asked what they do for a living, and they don't like putting time into this kind of thing. So spend a lot of time explaining the benefits, explaining why it's going to help them, and how it's going to help their business area and better serve members, and save them time from doing things that the computer should be doing. And then don't get fixed on the tech. Ignore the technology is our advice until you've got a really good understanding of what you should be doing. So focus on what you need, and not how you need it. Leave the how until later. Focus on the what. So what are your business processes? What kind of engagement do you need with your external audiences? Those things these days, back office and web projects are kind of merged now, because business processes go across the divide. So focus on the what people need to be able to do, and worry about the how much later. And then, of course, keeping it at the right level. I still see requirements documents coming out with people saying things like must be able to store a date of birth, must be able to store a full name and a surname. You don't need to do that anymore. The marketplace is full of really highly functional systems. So Just describe your higher level needs, particularly where you've got anything complicated or weird, and you really don't need to go into that minutia anymore. So focus on your complexities, and don't worry about the minor stuff. Those days are gone. Okay, so I'd just like to get into the whole topic of vendor selections. It's another area where things can too often go wrong. So let's talk about what really matters here. Again, we've got a module on how to get the best out of this as part of the course. It's just these. If you do these things right, and you do these things, if you don't do these things, you'll have a much better foundation for your project. So from here, here are some quick points that we have to, in the interest of time, we have to rattle through this really fast. But here are some quick points about what you're up against. So first of all, as you've already seen, you will no doubt being hounded by salespeople all of the time. If you Google what you need, you'll get hundreds of potential options to evaluate. And it's it's a bit of a minefield. There's a lot of different options out there, and it's really, really crowded and competitive. Of course, on the second point, you have a lot of people describing things in their own language, and sometimes you'll have entirely different terms for the same thing, or you'll have people describing the same thing using different terms. So it's really confusing. So an example might be in the world of education. You have people talking about a virtual learning environment, whereas other people talk about the student experience and Moodle, and there's a dozen different terms for the same thing. So it's very hard to work out the language. On point 3, one of the common areas of feedback we get is people say every supplier says they can do everything. So how am I going to differentiate them? How am I going to find out which ones are the way I want and which ones are not the way I want? And there's some very specific things we advise around that. How technical do you have to be? In the main, the answer is these days you don't have to be technical. You're describing what you want, going back to that point, not how they do it. That can all come a bit later. And then how do you construct a great invitation to tender? We have templates for great ITTs and what really matters in there. So we find that's a foundation document. And then where do you start? How do you start comparing like with like? And how do you get it treated as a proper project? And then finally, how do you sort out how you're going to look, how many suppliers you're going to look at, and who you're going to look at? You can't look at 50 suppliers. You'll be exhausted before you start, and then you won't have a good understanding of any of them. So there's a lot of challenges with this process. The main thing we have to say is recognizing the challenges just should allow you to structure your vendor selection, your partner selection properly so that you don't get it wrong. Common question that comes up is, why can't I just pick the right technology partner from a list? I can see there's a list. They all seem like they've got nice websites, etc. Why can't I just pick one? Why, in other words, why should this take 3 or 4 months to pick a technology supplier? And the answer is that it's such a critical decision that it's going to affect the next 10 years of your life. If you get this wrong, not only it might be the wrong technology supplier, even if it's the right technology supplier, but you haven't explained everything clearly between you and them, then you're going to be in trouble. That's why it needs the time it takes to not only understand your options, but make sure anyone you're talking to really understands you. Otherwise, all you're doing is dealing with sales waffle and misunderstandings on both sides. And Jackie and Tim, just to warn you, I'm going to ask for your comments on this in just a second, because I know you've both been through this any number of times. So then a second challenge that we find is people want to look at it as a buying technology. I'm buying Salesforce, I'm buying Dynamics, or I'm buying a Drupal website or a WordPress website. We find that really is a recipe for disaster. The organization that is delivering it to you is at least as important as the technology. And if you don't believe that, you can ask yourself, Why are there dozens and dozens of Dynamics or Salesforce projects, all using essentially the same platform of technology, but some of them go well and some of them go badly? Same tech. It's because of the way that you have prepared yourself and the way that you've engaged with the partner and made sure that they understand yourself properly. Then taking to that second point and the middle column, not spending enough time with potential suppliers is one of the leading causes of project problems and misunderstandings and shouts and disputes. So you've got to organize your vendor selection so that you can literally spend days and days and days with your short list of potential suppliers, so that you're able to clear up all misunderstandings and ensure you're on the same page. And then just recognizing that it's going to take a lot of your time. So imagine you're looking at 4 suppliers. You probably want at least 4 meetings with each of them to work out, which one of them are the best fit in all of these different areas. You probably want to include lots and lots of your staff. Just multiply it up, but that's the right way to do it, because anything short of skimping on the time will cost you later. So Tim, can I just come to you first, just for a change? How are you approaching or how have you approached the vendor selection process in the past, in terms of treating it as something your colleagues should be involved in and not just something that's a technical purchase that only you're involved in?
Yeah, I think that's really important. And I think that's the common theme throughout the technology change project, is just involving staff throughout. So you're getting constant buy-in for the project and selling the benefit. And I think in this stage, in the vendor selection stage, it's really important for the staff to be involved. So there's that cultural fit. I think the staff need to be comfortable with the technology partner that we're selecting, and they need to be comfortable that it's the right cultural fit, but also that assurance that they're an expert in our business area. So yes, the not-for-profit sector, yes, for us, a membership sector, but also just that cultural fit. And I think it's really important that staff get to engage with the technology partner at that stage, to make sure that works. Because like you say, that relationship could last 10 years, and so it really needs to be effective. So you need to get the staff involved with the technology providers there at that stage to make that work.
Absolutely. And Jackie, how do you manage to strike the balance between feeling like your colleagues feeling like, oh, I'm busy, I haven't got time to look at all of these people in suits waving their arms at me from technology suppliers, versus you used the word responsibility earlier, versus having your colleagues recognize that they have to be part of this decision in order to be a fully part of the project and engage with it later?
I think, again, it's the responsibility, accountability, making sure that they own that position on the vendor selection board. And you want a real cross departmental group of people. We have people from marketing, technical people, finance, operations, customer services, all the different. I think that's really key, to make sure that you've got a broad range, because you don't just want the money making decision makers there, because they'll look at it from one thing, and the technology people will look at it from another. You want a broad mix. And I think if there's one particular thing that I really took from this, is go and do in actual in-person site visits for references. When you've narrowed it down, go out and meet people in other organisations who have been through this, who have used potential suppliers that you're interested in, and go and talk to them, and get the warts and all, because this isn't all flowery. It's not all going to be smooth. There's going to be realistic challenges throughout this. Go and speak to people who've been through that. I think that's really, really key, and have a broad mix of people on board doing that selection process.
You're both 100% right. And that whole process of putting the time in to go and see people when you get to your shortlist, we can't overstate the importance of that. But how were they when something went wrong? Not if, because something will have gone wrong. How did they respond? Is a vital question.
Absolutely.
So I'm going to try and pick up the pace a bit. How do you pick your potential suppliers? I think Jackie and Tim, you've already talked a bit about this. So essentially, it should be based on your established criteria and making sure they can do everything that you need. over the last 10 years in the membership world, for instance, there's been a real move, a very positive move towards suppliers that can do both the back office CRM and the website portal at the same time, because there's no such thing as just doing one or the other these days. So actually picking someone who can do everything you need and do it really well, we found to be extremely important. Jackie, your point about references and go and see people, we found that to be found that to be just vital as well. The good functional fit is a given, but also make sure they've got a strong track record in delivering those things. Are they really good at, if CPD is very important to you, make sure they really understand CPD and the language, and they can add value on those things. You know, they cannot. It's not just that they'll do what you say robotically; that they've done it lots of times before, and they can talk about what works and where, you know, they've seen good things in the past on other clients, and they're adding value there. The track record is probably the single most important indicator for anyone you're considering working with. The reality is, technology providers might not like us saying this, but you know, Dynamics can be made to do pretty much everything that anyone needs. Salesforce can be made to do pretty much anything that you need, you know, given enough time and money. And most of the mature solutions out there can do that. What's really going to make the difference to you is not the difference between that tech and that tech. It's the track record of the supplier and their added value and their specialization in the sector. And by that final point on the sector, we mean don't be an outlier client as that final point. You want to be with a supplier that's investing in the kind of functionalities that you need, that your members need, that your customers need. You don't want to be the Lone Ranger as the only membership organization, the only charity that they're dealing with. You want them spending money on that continuously so that you benefit as they go. Okay, so just moving on from there. One final point. I'm just going to ask you about this team, Tim, if you don't mind. So people like to feel consulted on big decisions. You know, people like to be involved in the vendor selection, and actually, it's vital to use it as an educational process. You know, so that people feel excited and a bit buzzy about the project. So as we said here, you'll need it later. You know, when the dark days of all of the work comes in on the project, you need that initial positivity for people to stay the course. But if you're including everyone on the vendor selection, how do you avoid diary hell? How do you stop all meetings collapsing because there are too many people involved? And how do you avoid a bun fight at the end where 20 people can't make a decision on which vendor? So Tim, I know you've taken a particular approach to that, and that we've written it down here a little bit, which is partly from our course as well. But how have you managed that within your own organization? Could you just illustrate that, please?
Yeah, and I think that probably comes back to the sort of business plan and project planning phase, when you're looking at who you want to be involved in the project and being realistic with people's time. But as you say here on the slide, Alan, I think having a separation between those that are coming to the voting group, so those that are committed to meeting every single vendor, to go to all of those meetings, but then having an open invite for people to come and as a sort of consultation or attendance group to come to any one of those, but knowing that they won't then be shortlisting or voting. So we're still capturing some of that valuable feedback across the team, from business area support leads or finance or marketing, but actually that voting group is quite tight. So you'll probably have 3 or 4 key people, so you can sort of manage diary hell, and get all those meetings in with the vendor, but keep all of those meetings open so that people can sort of jump in as and when, and then offer you feedback. And what we found as well is actually just having a template for them to feedback to us so that we can take their comments aboard. And I think the benefit of doing that is that they feel included, that they get excited about the project because they start seeing what some of the vendors are offering, but also we keep a tighter control on the sort of voting element and the time commitment internally that's needed to do that properly.
Fantastic. And of course, you might have everyone saying, oh, I want to be on the voting group, not that you're publishing that as an option. But then in the real world, you're saying, all right, great, can you commit to these 17 meetings over the next 6 weeks? And suddenly the group shrinks quite rapidly. Very good. Okay, so let's moving on from there quickly. This is what a lot of organizations do now that just fails, and please don't do this. First of all, they create a feature dump, checklist of requirements. Sometimes it's endless. They then issue it to everyone in the marketplace, 30 different suppliers. The downside of that is that you've now got 30 different ITTs to respond to, or 30 different salespeople hounding you, which means you're just exhausted. And what you want, then inevitably leads to this kind of arm's length process where you say things like, if you as a potential supplier engage with us and ask us too many questions, we're going to kind of strike you off the list. You're just desperate to get it down to a manageable size list, which is no good. There's then a rush to pick one, get to contracts and budgets, kind of dog and pony show of presentations. You've got half an hour or an hour to show us everything, and we're going to pick one out of that. Then the reality of that comes out in the early stages of the project. All of these misunderstandings, all of these misaligned assumptions about who's doing what and at what cost, and then crash, bang, wallop. Invest the time. That's the main thing that we've got out of that. Okay, so preparing your organization for the project itself. So imagine you've got your business case approved. You've gone through 3 or 4 months doing it properly and picked your technology partner. Slightly in parallel with that, and before you have your kickoff meeting with your chosen technology supplier, you've got to prepare your own organization for the project. A really common thing to imagine here, and this is one of the biggest mistakes people make, is the idea that the supplier is going to do everything for you. It's a bit like if you're putting in, I don't know, a Microsoft Office or something else, someone else is going to do the whole thing, and then you just have to kind of use it afterwards. This tends to be root and branch. It's affecting all of your business processes and so many different things. They can't do it around you or at you. And typically what we find is that for every hour a supplier puts, here's a stat, every hour a supplier puts into your project, your organization, the sum of all of your time, will put in 7 or 8 hours. So just, for every hour they put in, you put in 7 or 8. So now you've got to prepare yourselves and brace all of your staff for that. Okay. So first of all, that point, projects are a lot of work. So understanding that and really taking that into your DNA will help protect you, because you have to be clear where that time is going to come from, who's going to put it in, and that making sure that that's prepared for people in their diaries and so on. That young woman on the screen here is saying, "You want me to do what? You want me to do what on top of my day job?" So you've really got to get people on board. So in terms of the structure within your own organization, you'll tend to have this kind of structure, and well, you must have. There's got to be a leadership end at your own organization, which will tend to be your management team, and one of your management team will acting as the project board, and one of your management team will be the project sponsor. And Jackie, I know that's a role you've taken on any number of times. Then you'll have the management of the actual day-to-day management of the project. That tends to be a project manager. Sometimes parts of project management, like communications and change management, can be fielded out to other people, but on most, it's all done under a project manager who is driving the project forward and tackling all of the issues. And then the project team tend to be your department heads or subject matter experts, your champions. So just going through that really rapidly, this is what's required out of your leadership group, whether it's your management team or a subset of them, that they are really making sure that people are available for the project. If someone's saying, I'm too busy to take part in this project, that's a problem for the leadership group. The project manager is not anyone's boss and cannot boss people around. So they need to be able to escalate things like that and get ahead of it through the leadership group. They give the organizational authority for the project, and they promote and champion the project. Their main role really is to support the project manager and support the project team. Not to shout at them or hold them to account, it's to support them. Then likewise, the project manager is the person who's going to be pushing this project along on a day-to-day basis, tackling problems, making sure everyone knows what they're doing, looking always ahead for over the next months and making sure that things are not going to go wrong, and driving it. And then finally, your advocates, your subject matter experts, they're bringing their knowledge of what the business needs. They're bringing their imagination of how it could be run better, and they're providing that in a structured way to the project, the project manager. just really briefly about how much time is required. Essentially, if you're going to be the project sponsor, you have to be prepared to spend at least a kind of half a day a week of tackling problems, saying the right things about the project, resisting, people's messages saying I'm too busy, etc. So it's around about 2.5 days a month. Someone who's on the project board, you can see there, we normally say about half a day a month to attend the project board meeting, but also to understand before and follow up afterwards with the meeting. Most project managers are full-time. Don't for a second imagine you can just load a full-time job onto someone internal's already full-time job. So that has to be tackled. And then finally, for your teams around the organization, it does vary by project phase, but there are really intensive phases during things like UAT and discovery, where it can take days a week for those different people around the organization. Jackie, can I just get your comment on this as someone who's been project sponsor very often? What's your experience of what really matters in that role, if you don't mind?
I think you've got to be able to make decisions, solid decisions, quickly. Sometimes unpopular one. I think with being a project sponsor, you've got to be really impartial. You must keep coming back to that initial business case, your strategy, your PID, and all those documents when you're making those decisions. You're often going to get caught between different areas wanting different things and different demands. So I think, yeah, you've got to be someone comfortable to make some tough decisions, and being able to say no is probably one of the hardest lessons. But also, you can only be as good as you are with your project manager who's feeding into you. I think for that role that's sandwiched between those two layers, that's such an important role. It should be something that's ideally full-time as well. But yeah, I think as a project sponsor, I've worked with some brilliant project managers, and it's really worth that investment.
Absolutely. Thank you. And then so this structure is something you could be setting up and establishing. You must set up and establish before you have your kickoff meeting with your supplier. So working backwards from your supplier meeting, really you should be thinking about this in the months leading up to your kickoff meeting, so that people are braced for the project. Everyone knows what they're doing. The decision structure, as you say, Jackie, is signed off, and so on. Great. And this all ties into that change management and communications. You're doing all of this ahead of the project. It's very time consuming, but vital to get all of that done, or you will not have a successful project. So carrying on from there. So a really common question that comes up is, should I invest in a dedicated project manager for my project, or can I just load it on to the day job of the membership manager, or the answer to that? So our own research shows that over 80% of nonprofits planning a biggish project will bring in temporary project management. And that makes perfect sense. If you're thinking this is going to be 30, 40 hours a week work, if you think your colleagues to have 30, 40 hours a week where they're not doing anything, you should probably have fired them by now. So the reality is it's extra work and specialist knowledge that really has to be brought in if you can afford it. There are middle routes where you can buy in support or guidance, put people on training courses. Those are all options if you absolutely can't afford it. Most people find a way of including it in the budget. Okay, so then there are just a brief word on vital project documents. We believe these documents are such a vital part of your project management that it's really important that you look at them as your tools, things that are going to help you, not just as admin that is going to add to your workload. They're actually going to protect you and make sure that you don't get caught out, or that you're not surprised. So I'll just flick through these really fast. What we've done as part of the course, by the way, is we've developed 30 really beautiful project templates covering everything from a communications plan, a business case, a budget tracker, all of these kind of things, so that people can look fantastic when they're managing their own project and presenting these documents, but also they're protecting themselves from things being surprises and going wrong. Okay, so then there's also we've created a top 10 planning checklist. we'll send you this as part of the follow-up. So I won't be spending any time on that, just in the interest of time on this webinar. And then I'll just zip through there to talk about supplier management. Again, we're sending you this, so I'll just essentially make the point that the whole benefit of this is to have a partnership relationship based on a really clear joint understanding that you've established with your potential technology partners during the selection process. Okay, so this is going back to a point on the people side that I'll just say it really briefly while we're here. If you don't invest in getting your colleagues on board with the project, your project will fail. It'll fail that you might technically go live, but no one's using it, or they're carrying on working around the system. It'll fail because you haven't got the benefits that you promised from all of the money. So you've got to focus on your colleagues and how they work and how you can help them change the way they work, and then continuously through the project. So that just means focusing on things like communicating, as Jackie said, listening to people, understanding their fear. They might not use that word, but people do get very anxious. And then invest in training for people. That can be project training or training on the new solution as it's happening, and give them feedback channels so that people feel listened to, and they're acting as a safety net for you, by the way, because you can forget stuff and they bring it to your attention, but you have to make that as easy and as positive as possible to do that. Okay, so hints and tips. There's just a point about scope group. Everyone forgets it. Everyone says, yes, we can do that. Yes, we can do that. Yes, we can do the other. And then 6 months later, when people are saying, why is it overrunning and over budget? They've forgotten all of these yeses that you said. So managing expectations is really, really key around that. We do make a point about going live with the smallest possible set of functionalities and building up from there, and then keeping your project sponsor on board. So just a quick wrap up. We've had some fantastic questions in the Q&A. We're not going to have time to get to all of them. So what I'll do, if you don't mind, just so that we understand who we're talking to on the Q&A, we'll send you all of the summary that we've talked about. But I just want to ask some quick fire questions of Jackie and Tim, just so that we can get your view of what you wish you'd done differently on projects, if you don't mind. So let's start off with, would you have done things significantly differently than you have in your own project now? Just yes, no's. Great. So right up to the camera. You've got cameras on blur, so yes, you have to hold it right up to the camera. So a yes and a yes. Fantastic. So then, would you have spent more time preparing your teams? I know you've spent some time. Would you have spent even more time? So that's a yes from Tim and a yes from Jackie. Well, there's a lesson for everybody. Did you have a formal business case? By me, quite a structured document and process. That's a yes and a yes. Well done for both of you. Did you have difficulties getting it signed off? Do people say, bugger off, I'd rather not make a decision, or I'd rather not spend the money? Yes, difficulties on both. And yes, difficulties on both. Great. Did you use an external project manager? Yes and yeses. Okay, good. Didn't try and tackle it in-house. And how did you spend enough time preparing your staff for the extra work, or do you wish to spend more time? No, didn't spend enough time. You can never spend enough time. That's the valuable lesson there. Great. Okay, I'm just going to move on from those, just again in the interest of time. Oh, by the way, you both provided the course that we've been talking about to your staff. Did it help? Yay! Fantastic. All right. Well, that's what I was hoping to hear. Okay. I just want to ask a quick poll of people, if I may. So if I could, essentially, we just want to ask people a quick question about your own project. So could I essentially, from in here, just ask people what they think on the course here. So I'm sorry, the polling has stopped working for some reason. Okay, I'll have to skip skip the poll. All right, so moving on from there, I think we can just get to the Q&A if we may. And we've had some fantastic questions coming up. I'm going to have to go very fast through them. Thank you very much for posting questions, everybody. So I've got a question from somebody saying, how much should the CEO be involved in driving the project and the decision? Could I ask you that one, Jackie?
Yeah, I think it really depends on your organisation. So where I was before, I was the CEO and very hands-on on the project. The CEO, not so much, but I think that's probably background operation. Where I am now, we're such a small team that I will be wearing lots and lots of hats. So I really do believe that it depends on the organisation. But for me, what I'm really passionate about is I think your actual culture makes or breaks these projects. So I do think as the CEO in that position, you have a responsibility to oversee and do everything you can in your power to make that this is a positive change. Ultimately, you're the one who's driving it through forward, and to be too hands off is not necessarily a good thing.
Fantastic. And then this one for you, Tim. What's the best way to communicate technical benefits to non-technical stakeholders?
Yeah, I've definitely come across this, and I think it's just focusing on the business processes with non-technical people. So why we need to do what we need to do, and the issues that we've got at the moment, and just really trying to break that down in layman's terms of this is the process that we need to do to be able to engage with members or delegates. This is the barrier at the moment, and so we need a solution, and this is what's out there. These are the solutions. So just trying to break it down really into layman's terms for them.
Yes, and as you say, focusing exactly on real world benefits, organizational benefits that are driven by the technology, not the technology itself. So, and then Jackie, one for you. How do you go about investigating the track record of your suppliers? You made one really important point earlier, but how did you go and make it clear what you wanted from them and investigate it?
I think because there's huge amounts out of there. So obviously we went via Hart Square at the time, and so we probably started with about 20 potentials. Look at the people that they've done work for before. Look at the organisations. Look at where you've got synergies with those organisations. And I would say that's not just that because you're another membership organisation, but what are you trying to achieve? So we were coming away from really old legacy systems with a lot of data. So that was really key for me to try and find a supplier with that experience. So hone in on what your specific bespoke needs are for your organisation, and try and go and find those partners who have worked in similar areas, maybe a different size. And as I said before, go out and visit those organisations. Go and talk to the staff who would have been involved and would have been impacted by those technology projects, and get their viewpoint. And then all the other things like do your due diligence, make sure that you look at their financials and all of that. They'll all show you beautiful websites that they've crafted before, but try and get below that, get beyond the salespeople, get underneath and go and speak to the people who've worked with these organisations before, definitely.
Right, and then one final question I'm going to ask to both of you just before I wrap up. We're slightly over time. Who should be accountable for the success of the project? Is it your supplier, or is it your management team and internal project manager? What's your view on that?
I think it's both, but I think the where projects haven't gone well in the past, I think, is recognizing that on the internal side, so on your staff side, and not just assuming, right, we've handed over a whacking great amount of cash and signed a contract, and therefore supplier needs to take care of everything else. I think it's 50-50, and I think it's the projects that are successful are where, or the ones I've been involved in, are where you recognize that as a staff group, and you put in at least as much as the supplier, if not more, I think. So
absolutely. Great. And Jackie?
I say it's that project board, and that project board, in a way, work in collaboration. It should be made up of people from your own organisation, but the key partners with whoever you've chosen as your supplier. Ultimately, if you're working well together, then you should take joint responsibility for all the things that go well, but also all the things that don't go so well. And like everything, don't go down into that blaming type of relationship, because that's not going to help everybody. I think collaboration's key, but make sure that the people on that board also do understand the responsibility that they're taking on. It's not for them just to walk away if it doesn't go right, or bathe in the glory if it's all wonderful.
That's great. That's great advice from both of you. Thank you. Thank you for everyone else who's put a Q&A question in. I think what I'll do is I'll respond to all of the questions and maybe consult with Tim and Jackie, and we'll respond to them in the follow-up email as well. So I just want to say a huge thanks to Jackie and Tim for making the time and giving us your insight and advice on that. And I'm just going to wrap up essentially to say we're going to provide the video, as I've already said, and the content. We're going to provide a feedback form, and we really beg you to give us your feedback. There is the benefit of 50% off the course as well. And we're going to provide some very nice job aids and templates for further learning. And we're going to invite you to join our Dear Savvy community, which is where people who are faced with a project can vent to each other, give each other help and advice, and just share the wonders of being a project manager in your own organization. And then finally, we look forward to seeing you at the next webinar, which is on March 12th. We'll send you an invitation to that, which is about the 7 costly mistakes that membership bodies make on tech projects and how to avoid them. So thanks to my panel again. Thanks to everyone for making the time. I look forward to seeing you on the next webinar. Thank you very much.